Izuku Midoriya is born into the world we all know in My Hero Academia, full of quirks, superpowers, and so much more. Izuku, well, he's hopeful that he can gain a quirk that would allow him to become one of the greatest heroes alive. But when growing up, he was super interested in different weaponry and fighting styles, and that would include the fighting style of the samurai. He would be extremely interested in all of it, in their discipline, in the way they approach things, in just their heroics. He believed that bringing this idea of a samurai to the world that they live in now could be beneficial to everybody. The samurai could be Japan's greatest protector. At least that's what he believes for the moment. And that's what he believes in terms of heroes and heroics. Now, is there 100% guarantee that someone with blades and swords and stuff like that and katanas will really be a great protector in this type of world? Of course not. There is never a guarantee in that regard. But there is still hope for Izuku, especially when he's at around 5 or 6 years old. He would actually get something, get information, and get told that, guess what? That he is, well, absolutely absolutely ready for whatever is to come, because he was given an opportunity of becoming an actual massive hero. An epic thing, an epic kind of idea of him creating and him being a samurai himself. And that's exactly what Izuku is becoming, because he would be told that he has some sort of quirk that is related to some in certain circumstance related to the samurai themselves, in which this right here would shock. This would shock Izuku. This would make Izuku just be completely surprised. I mean, are you serious? Like, I have potentially the powers of a samurai, or the strength and the kind of will of a samurai, and that's something that would blow his mind. Like, this is insane. Are you sure? In which obviously the doctor would tell him, like, yeah, we are 100% sure. You have the aspects of a samurai, and it seems like it's gonna go even beyond that. And he's curious, what does he mean, like, beyond that? In which he tells him, start training, start working hard, work on your sword skills, your reflexes, and just try to start learning the way of the blade, and just learn more and more as you go, and maybe one day you can be the hero you seek out to be. And that's exactly what Izuku Midoriya plans to do. And for years to come, Izuku starts working on his craft. He starts working on anything you could possibly think of in terms of becoming the samurai his quirk entails him to be. And he begins training in martial arts, begins training in the way of the sword, starts working with different swords, different katanas, and different things like that, different masters and senseis alike. And Izuku begins to pick up on things at a very fast rate, like faster than really anyone has in the past. It seems like he has some supernatural way of usage of a sword, and his reflexes and his deep connection to the sword and to what the samurais are supposed to be seems to be there and developing as he goes throughout life. It's as if he has a massive advantage over every single person who is basically trying to train the same way he is training. He is just on a different level compared to them. His sword skills are on a completely different level. His just way of fighting on a different level. And he continues to show that he is completely prepared for anything. But as it is all said and done, as he becomes around 12 years old, Izuku has already excelled even the masters themselves. He's already at that level of master swordsman and or master of martial arts, so in terms of his own version of martial arts. Of course, he doesn't have every single martial art under his belt. because most of his fighting is definitely attributed to utilizing weapons and or swords and knives and blades. But Izuku has a really, really good understanding of fighting in general. So he really starts training on his own around the age of 12 and stops going to these classes and working with these senseis and masters all alike, and he starts working on other things. He felt that there was something deeper within his quirk, something more that he wasn't necessarily understanding just yet. And one of those things, well, has to do with his blade. He begins to try his best to form something he didn't know was even possible, and he begins to generate this energy around his arms and even his katana. And when he wields it, it not only is it affecting the shape, the size, but also the sharpness depending on the intent that he wants to approach things with. He begins to utilize this as a way of striking through even the thickest of logs, like giant trees. He slices through them easily. Normally, with his regular katana, he would not be able to do this. He wouldn't be able to even get close to slicing through the wood. But in this regard, with this energy blade, he's able to do so. He wonders, he might even be able to create this energy blade without even having a katana with him. But he doesn't really think too much and too hard about doing that. And he just continues kind of training, working hard, and progressing. And that's the main thing for Izuku, progressing. He needs to progress with his training and progress with his wants and desires to become a hero. And he wants to do everything the right way, because that's the way Izuku really approaches things. He wants to do everything the correct and proper way and really do everything with honor. So when he has someone by the name of Katsuki Bakugo continuously being arrogant, messing with him, trying to test him, trying to fight him, he really doesn't like it. Him and Bakugo are far from being friends, and he tells Bakugo that he really wants nothing to do with him. He doesn't want to talk to him, he doesn't want to deal with him, he doesn't want to do anything like that, and he doesn't want to even be associated with him. He tells Bakugo that his arrogance will get him caught out one day. His arrogance will make him far less of a hero than he wants to be, and that's something he needs to keep in check. But Bakugo basically threatens him and says well, if you want to keep it in check, then you better do it yourself and basically fight me. In which, of course, Izuku doesn't take the bait. He tells him, I'm not going to fight you. There's no point for me fighting you. There's no reason I should fight you. And I'm going to, I'm not going to do any of that. And, of course, Izuku continues this idea all the way up until he's about 15 years old. And he's one of those kids that definitely takes the role of being a samurai very seriously. Every aspect of being a samurai, in terms of, honor and really approaching things the right way, is something that Izuku is doing day in and day out. He's definitely incorporating everything to do with honor, technique, and basically being a good person to heart, especially when he's progressively becoming more like a samurai and more of a samurai in general. And Izuku just continues this idea and continues doing this, and he just goes through class and goes through school all the way up until the basic last day of middle school. And this is when he has to deal with Bakugo, because Bakugo is running his mouth, saying this, saying that Izuku's not going to get into UA, that Bakugo is going to get into UA, but Izuku, he's useless, and he's this, he's that. And Izuku's just kind of why do you do this? Why do you feel the need to put others down to make yourself feel better? Why do you feel the need to have other people kind of worship you, make you seem like you're better than you actually are? What's the point? Seriously, what's the point of doing so? And Bakugo kind of just, in a way, ignores this and kind of says oh, you're just an idiot, you're just a Deku, you're just useless, and that's why you don't want to fight me. You think you're gonna lose, or you're gonna lose, and blah blah blah. And that's really what is happening. And he tells Bakugo all of these things, and he really just relays everything that Bakugo is as a person, and he kind of puts it all out there. And this would really piss off Bakugo, really piss him off. He would be freaking mad that that Izuku feels that he is, you know, better than him, that he thinks that he's so much better than him that he can, you know, do this and you know, be like, hey, you should really keep it down and not do this. And he really looks at Izuku as if he's somewhat or somehow so much better than him, right? Like that's what is like, as if Izuku is looking at Bakugo in that way. But of course, Izuku, he's not even thinking about this. He has no like kind of worries about Bakugo in terms of, he's not thinking like Bakugo is like, oh yeah, like you think you're better than me, like I'm gonna hurt you for that. And he's not even thinking about that. He's just being honest with Bakugo, being true to what he believes, and really trying to express that toward Bakugo. But Bakugo, well, he doesn't care. Like he genuinely doesn't care, and he is just absolutely just annoyed and pissed off at Izuku for even talking to him like this. And at the end of the day, at the end of the day of middle school, well, Bakugo is actually threatening Izuku, trying to get him to fight, and Izuku continues to just ignore him. And before you know it, Bakugo would even take that stance and actually try to fight Izuku, trying to shoot an explosion at him. But before you know it, Izuku was already behind Bakugo, dodging the explosion and walking out the door. And this would shock everybody, thinking like, that was insane. How did he just do that? I mean, at the end of the day, he just dodged an explosion against Bakugo, and he made Bakugo look like he was nothing. Like he just dodged it and just walked away like a fight was never even going to happen. And that right there is what's messing. It's really messing with Bakugo's head. Like, oh my, like, what are you doing? Like, how are you going to just ignore me? How are you going to just, you know, just freaking act like I don't exist? And that pisses Bakugo off, like really pisses Bakugo off. But of course, Izuku is not even really thinking much about that. He's just leaving. He just leaves and heads out, and he kind of goes on to his next, the next thing he needs to deal with. And that's just heading home, preparing for the UA entrance exam, preparing for the rest of his life, because that's what he believes, that he's preparing for the rest of his freaking life. And Izuku goes on to basically head home as he heads underneath a bridge. And as he heads underneath that bridge, he would actually be attacked by a villain, a sludge villain. But this sludge villain incident, will be far different than it's ever been before. Because Izuku might not have his sword on him, but when he turns toward the sludge villain, he would reach his hands out, and a spectral-like energy blade would show up. And Izuku would smile, and he would realize that he could do this. This isn't something he's really worked on much, but it's something he's thought about quite a bit. And he can actually do it, creating a spectral-like blade, and he begins fighting the sludge villain, slashing through him with the energy-like blade that would actually hurt the sludge villain when cutting through him. It's not like a normal typical blade, so it's not going to get stuck or, you know, not have an effect on the sludge villain. And it begins to cut the sludge villain into little pieces. But as he's about to finish the fight, someone would show up, and that would be All Might himself. And All Might would land one punch to the sludge villain, sending him flying, splattering everywhere, and Izuku is in shock, thinking like, wow, this is All Might. This is somebody who I have looked up to for so long, and this is somebody who's, you know, like is a real inspiration. And he talks to All Might a little bit, asking a couple questions, nothing too crazy, but All Might would of course bring up the fact that he has massive potential, and he should continue really going into that potential with hopefully becoming a hero, and more specifically going to UA High School. And that right there is kind of indicator that Izuku knows that he should be headed off to UA High School and really approach that next portion of his life, which is getting into UA High School through the entrance exam. And that's what he prepares for. After that is all said and done, and after everything is kind of, you know, dealt with the sludge villain getting put in a bottle and or multiple bottles and stuff like that, Izuku heads home and starts his 10-month preparation to be the hero he wants to be, especially when he's preparing for the UA entrance exam. He starts working on different things, different techniques, working with his kind of energy blade, but also working with some other things that he believes is possible, right? He believes that there's more to actually his blade and more to his act of fighting than anything. But obviously there's a lot of things for him to really understand and a lot of things for him to basically get a hold of, and he gets a lot of that training and usage of these unknown ideas through meditation, through understanding, and through basically just working hard. He meditates, he works hard, he slices through different things, just testing his physical but also mental limits, and that helps him just generate other things as well. It upholds and helps kind of his enhanced reflexes and or his kind of like foresight to knowing what his opponent's next moves are. But he also has this kind of Zen-like mode that he understands and also figures out. That Zen-like mode is basically when he can calm his mind, become extremely focused, and he can enter a state where things feel slower. And one day he figures out he can do this when he's just sitting by like by where cars and these like cars go by this road, and he begins focusing. And as he focuses so intently, he begins to see the cars go like 35 to 50% slower. And this kind of shocks him. Like, this is kind of insane. Like, it's that much slower, and it feels like he's able to move at the normal speed he would move at. But that's not really the biggest thing for him to think about. That's just something that he believes is possible, and he just has to find a way to really, really focus on it. But there's a lot of other things that he can do physically and do in terms of just fighting and stuff like that he is continuously utilizing, and it even has a lot to do with his kind of energy blade projection, where he's able to create that energy blade. There's so much to that specifically, even more powers and strengths that he could utilize that he doesn't even know about. But he hopes that UA will allow him to kind of figure all of that out, especially after he gets into the UA entrance exam. And when he takes the UA entrance exam, I'm gonna be completely honest, this is easy for Izuku. Even if he's not allowed to actually bring his sword, he could just create a sword made of energy, or kind of that energy projection like sword, and he begins to cut through robot after robot, like destroying them, cutting, slicing, and just splicing every single robot you possibly can imagine. And he is a very, very fast person, and he is just going and obliterating these robots, and he's easily defeating all of these robots, getting a pretty damn impressive score. But when somebody's in trouble, that's where Izuku truly shows off his capabilities, standing in front of the girl that is covered in rubble, and he begins to increase the size of his energy projected blade. It grows taller, wider, longer, everything, and he begins to have this giant katana that would strike down, cutting this giant 0-point robot in half, cutting it in half, and it would splice down the middle and fall apart entirely, and everybody is standing there in shock. The teachers who are watching, the heroes that are watching, are in utter disbelief at what they just watched. This kid has just destroyed the 0-point robot in one foul swoop. Who's the last person to really do something of that degree? The last person they can really think of, well, is All Might himself. This kid, he's something else. That they haven't really ran into somebody that really was this well tuned already. That he seemingly has already put in so much work, so much practice, and so much training before even going to UA in general. Most kids, they kind of coast. They kind of coast with the idea of their quirk. They don't work with it. They don't train with it. They're just kind of like, oh yeah, it's cool. That's what it is. But he didn't think that way. He didn't. He continued to push the boundaries of his quirk, and it seems like it has paid off in absolute heaps, and it seems like it's going to pay off in the future because, well, the kid already is in UA. He got in, but on top of that, when he gets that letter, he is told by All Might himself that he is the #1 student in Class 1A. Izuku Midoriya is going to lead the Class 1, the first years, the Class 1A and Class 1B first years as the #1 student, and he wouldn't want it any other way, especially with hoping that he could really behold this samurai code and kind of really hold on to the heroics that he wants to bestow on the hero society in general. And this is when we get into the classroom once again, and we finally have the first day of UA High School. Izuku enters, and he's pretty normal in terms of just sitting down, hanging out. Some people try to talk to him. He talks to them, tries to be somewhat friendly, but he's not really good at interactions the way that many others would be better at interactions than him. But he basically tells them like what he can do, what he's done, and blah, blah, blah. And let's just say someone is there that is very upset that Izuku, of all people, or at least he would end up learning that Izuku, of all people, got first place in the entrance exam. Because when Aizawa tells them all to head out for a quirk assessment, because he doesn't believe in that bull malarkey, orientation, they would head out and they would begin to test each other's abilities in a very, let's call it, least optimal way. And Izuku starts by throwing a ball. Now his distance is pretty impressive because naturally he's very strong, but he's not going to launch it to space, right? It's going to be like a 200 to 300 meter throw because of his strength. Now when Bakugo goes, he goes further than even Izuku, and he begins to talk to Izuku saying like, oh yeah, we're about to see how much better I am than you and blah blah blah. And Izuku just says that what he did was very impressive, and that's it. And of course, Aizawa absolutely loves this. He thinks this is hilarious in its own way, because Izuku seems like a humble kid. He seems like he has things figured out for himself. So he doesn't have to really sit here and try to impress other people or try to impress even the teachers or even himself. He knows what he's doing. And Aizawa says to Bakugo that if he wants to be cocky and wants to think that this is all like, it's not like, sunshine and rainbows and blah, 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 and he wants to show off to these people, then how about we make this a bit of a challenge? Let's do this. He tells them that if Bakugo gets a lower score than Izuku at the end of the day, then, well, he'll be expelled from UA High School. In which everyone's in shock. What? No way. And does that mean Izuku will be expelled if he's not, if he doesn't do better than Bakugo? And Aizawa says no. Izuku's not going to be expelled. Because Izuku didn't start talking smack and started saying this and that, thinking that he's better than everybody. So let's see what he can do. In which, at the end of the day, when they do the entirety of the you could say, quirk assessment, or the kind of like exam for their quirks, Izuku starts showing exactly what he can do in terms of his speed, his grip strength, and all of the above. Sidesteps, everything. His speed is outlandish, and everybody thinks like this is pretty crazy. He creates kind of like a temporary blade, his kind of like phantom-like blade, you could even call it, or more of like an energy blade, and he slashes across and uses that as his way of speed. And he just dashes across the area even faster than someone like Tenya Ida can run. Short distance kind of control is something that Izuku is very good at, so it's going to benefit him when he's actually utilizing it to that extent. And Izuku, well, at the end of the day, would even do better than Bakugo himself, and Aizawa would sit there and say, well, it looks like the kid isn't as good as he thought he was, because, well, it seems like someone still beat him. In which everyone's like, oh my goodness, does that mean he's really going to get expelled? But Aizawa says no. He's not going to expel him. It was just a ruse, and it's not a big deal. And he tells him tells all of them that being humble as a hero is a big deal, and that they should really think about what they're doing before they even do it. And really think about what they say before they even say it. In which everyone kind of thinks about this and is like, you know what? He's kind of right. Like, we have to really be careful with how we approach things and how we think about things, because you never know when things could fall straight on its face. But Bakugo, he's not thinking about this at all, especially because the very next day, they have training, Heroes versus Villains training with All Might, but Bakugo makes this into a whole stint. He immediately challenges Izuku to a fight. saying that this is what they should do, that they should have fights, that they should see who the strongest is, which All Might tries to tell him, like, that's not what we're doing. But after a ton of arguments and Bakugo yelling and being annoying, All Might says, you know what, how about this? Everyone else will do heroes versus villains training, but Bakugo and Izuku will go one-on-one, and they will be their first, and it'll be the first people to actually fight. He will put them out there, 1 versus 1, and whoever hits the ground first loses. And it's that simple. In which, of course, All Might says to Izuku to go all out. Don't allow him to just, coast, or don't allow him to do anything. He gives him a wooden sword and tells him to not hurt the guy badly, but really show him. Because he knows that Izuku can handle himself. I mean, he already defeated an actual villain. Like, he defeated one on his own for the most part. So he knows he can handle himself. So he watches as Izuku and Bakugo head to head, and immediately Izuku is showing the level he is at, and it is far beyond anything Bakugo is capable of at this moment. He begins to whack him with the wooden sword in different places quicker than you could imagine. Every explosion, every punch that is thrown, Izuku easily dodges and easily counters, smacking Bakugo over and over and over again, eventually smacking his legs out from underneath him, and he collapses on the ground. And All Might would say that it's over now, that the fighting and the training is over for them, and that they both did a very good job. But maybe Bakugo needs to find a way to humble himself a little bit, because there's always a bigger fish. There's always going to be someone stronger. And if you understand that now, and you understand that there's always going to be someone stronger, then you might be able to actually eclipse that said person who is stronger than you. In which immediately Bakugo is pissed. He hates being embarrassed. He hates being acted like he's some small kid that is, not to the level of Izuku. But it's been proven now that Izuku is better than him, and it is proven that one-on-one, it's not a fair fight. And eventually Bakugo has to come to terms with that, at least at this moment, and they have to just watch the rest of the people there, or the students, go through their heroes versus villains training. And after everyone's training is all said and done, they all just kind of go off to go to their normal classes, class after class, their normal studying routines, whatever you can think of. And every single day after those classes, Izuku can be found literally in any single type of training facility you can think of. I mean, he is in the UA kind of practice training facility almost all the time, every single day they possibly can. And he got full permission, obviously, from faculty or Aizawa, and he's there. Like, he's there after school, and then he leaves, goes home, comes back early morning, and he's training again. That's what the type of person Izuku continues to be. And no one else has that type of work ethic. No one else is even close. And that next morning, before they actually go to the USJ, Aizawa basically is there talking to Izuku, telling him that everybody needs a day off from time to time, so don't do this too crazily. And Izuku nods his head, saying that he understands, that he'll make sure to take his days off so that he doesn't, completely go haywire, and make sure that he doesn't, hurt himself. In which Aizawa says that he has a lot of potential as a hero, a lot of potential, and they all want to keep him in the right mind space, right? Keep him where he should be. And which Izuku nods his head and says he'll make sure to keep his head on straight, and he'll make sure to always follow the right line. In which Aizawa tells him that, well, as good as that sounds, sometimes following the right line is easier said than done. And he leaves as Izuku finishes his training, and then it will be finally time for them to get ready and set up for a bus ride to the USJ. And during that bus ride, they kind of chat. Everyone chats to each other about, how strong they are, who's stronger, who's the strongest, and blah, blah, blah. And Izuku himself, he's not really entertaining these conversations. He's not really into these conversations. He doesn't want to talk about any of this. Like, he doesn't want to blab about if he's stronger than this person, stronger than this person. He doesn't care. And they would eventually arrive at the USJ, enter, and they would meet Pro Hero 13. They would talk about what the USJ is about, what's going to happen, what's going on. But eventually, before you even know it, well, the villains would attack. the villains would invade, portals would open up, and villains would attack the USJ. And before even Aizawa could jump into action, Izuku is already jumping into action. Aizawa can't stop him, so he jumps into action with him, and Izuku begins to knock out and or slice through, of course not killing, but slicing through using a energy-like blade, defeating villain after villain, like very quickly. Aizawa helps him do this as well as they're beating villain after villain after villain, but Aizawa tells him that he really shouldn't have jumped in and started fighting immediately, in which Izuku says that if he has the capabilities of defending those who really need defending, that he shouldn't wait. He shouldn't allow anything to happen, and he should be the one to jump in before anyone gets hurt. In which Aizawa would look at him for a second and have a slight smirk and think that this kid, he's more ready than he possibly could imagine. And they defeat almost all of the villains that are in front of them, and quickly in that and everybody is kind of in shock at how quick every villain there is kind of defeated, or at least all the ones in the central area. And Shigaraki would be forced to actually have the Nomu attack earlier than normal. And of course, they would have Tenya Ida with the opening run off to go get help, and that includes help from All Might. But Izuku, well, he would stand toe-to-toe with the Nomu. And the Nomu, yeah, he's a freak of nature. He's strong. But Izuku, well, he realizes that this Nomu is going to allow him to go all out. And he starts going all out, sharpening his blade, creating the blade to be even stronger. And he starts utilizing something he hasn't gotten a chance to really utilize, and that is his Zen mode, creating this battle trance that is overcoming him. He begins to focus intently as everything slows down around him, and he begins to absolutely slice through the Nomu over and over and over again, to the point where he can feel that the Nomu is massively strong in terms of durability, but it's not going to stop him from cutting through what he needs to cut through. And he begins to cut through the Nomu, slicing through one of his legs, slicing through one of his arms, but not cutting it off entirely, but making it so that the nerves become kind of haywire, to the point where the Nomu can't really move anywhere faster than he normally does. Because eventually his Zen mode would run out, but Izuku would still have enough kind of done in terms of injuring the Nomu, to the point where he's not regenerating as fast, but also is slower than usual, cutting and slicing through the Nomu over and over again as he continues to pierce through him with strike after strike, even to the point where he unveils another technique that allows him to focus his strength on a specific strike that would cut through basically nearly any defense ever. And he begins to slice with one final slice, and he cuts through the Nomu once again, and it slows him down to the point where the Nomu can barely move, and the Nomu collapses on the ground. Now, the Nomu's not out for the count fully just yet, but luckily with the help of All Might just arriving, he's able to take on the Nomu and defeat him. But before anything else could even ensue, Izuku would be looking for Shigaraki, looking for Kurogiri, and that's where he would attack. With the help of Aizawa canceling both of their quirks, or at least canceling the quirk of Shigaraki, he's able to get towards Shigaraki and actually knock him out quicker than you would think. Because Izuku, in terms of fighting skills, especially with the lack of quirk from Shigaraki, he's able to defeat Shigaraki very fast, defeating him and having him knocked out pretty quickly. And then, of course, with the help of Shigaraki, or the help of Aizawa and other students, they're able to actually knock out Kurogiri as well. And this would stop the fights, or the kind of the fights from happening any further, but also stop the eventual escape of the League of Villains, stopping Shigaraki and also Kurogiri from escaping, and they would capture them quickly, as Aizawa is obviously still able to utilize his quirk and not massively hurt by the Nomu like normal. And Izuku's ability and fighting skills have shown to be very capable, especially with his ability to kind of slow down time around him, allowing him to keep up with the Nomu in a way that All Might would have had to basically go all out against him. And luckily enough, Izuku's attacks are kind of not to a physical and kind of, front forward level. It's more like his attacks are attacking on a deeper level, are cutting through the Nomu's quirks, are cutting through the kind of the deep parts of the Nomu itself, and that right there allowed him to slow down and defeat the Nomu himself. But with the help of All Might, it would guarantee the defeat of the Nomu, and the Nomu would fall short, and the League of Villains would fall short, and they would fall right here and right now at the USJ. After the USJ, Izuku has a decision to truly make. I mean, obviously they have a little bit of an intermediate time, a couple days of just training, relaxing, and all the above, and Izuku has kind of some choices to be made, especially when we have something that is coming up very soon. And that something is the UA Sports Festival. The UA Sports Festival is going to be an important time for Izuku Midoriya because he's going to be able to show off what he's capable of doing. But the choice he's going to have to make after it is all said and done is where he's going to go for his training, where he's going to go for his internship. And those are some very, 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 very important things. But that decision might be made quicker than you would think, because Izuku would actually get approached by somebody, approached before the UA Sports Festival by All Might himself. And this was about something he couldn't even possibly imagine. This is about the quirk of All Might, the quirk known as One for All. All Might would offer Izuku a chance at actually taking on the quirk and being the successor of All Might and the successor to One for All, and this would shock Izuku. He believes that All Might is one of the most high level, one of the most respected, one of the most honorable heroes ever, and to take on the powers of All Might himself, I mean, that's truly an honor. That is truly something he would hold close to his chest, and he honestly thinks on it for quite a while. And this is before the UA Sports Festival, of course. And Izuku decides that he wants to take on this quirk, but he doesn't want to actually utilize it for the UA Sports Festival, in which All Might says that he understands the quirk is going to take a lot of training to understand and also prepare with, so it would be best to avoid actually gaining or utilizing it until after the UA Sports Festival. So that is the decision that is made. But in terms of the capabilities that Izuku has right now, I mean, he is no freaking joke for the UA Sports Festival, especially when you have the obstacle course race, which is a breeze for Izuku, who decides to basically just outlast and outrun every single person there. And with his capabilities and his just strength and already enhanced strength and speed, he's able to overcome the obstacle course race massively and actually just barely get the number one spot. But in terms of the cavalry battle, I mean, Izuku is, in terms of fighting capabilities, would be at a totally different level and also a better advantage. And that advantage wouldn't really matter who he has on his team, but his team would be built up of Mei Hatsume, Ochaku Uraka, and also Tokiyami. And this would allow him to fend people off with his kind of blade, but also utilize that Zen mode that he's been utilizing to see things coming before they actually approach him. And he's able to fend these people off, defeat them, handle them, anything you can imagine. And he'd be able to really deal with any incoming attacks, any things that are really are approaching him at fast speeds, and anything that he has to really deal with in the long run. And the cavalry battle would end with him and his team getting on to that next round. But that next round is something that is a spectacle, something that everybody's going to watch and realize the level Izuku Midoriya is truly at, because he is outstanding at things like this. Because these are 1-versus-1 battles, and the first one is against Hitoshi Shinso, who Izuku obviously would not fall for the mind control quirk, and he would easily be able to defeat him. But the real fight is when he faces off with Todoroki, and this is a spectacle to watch, because Izuku is slashing through iceberg after iceberg, and everybody is oohing and awing at the fact that Izuku is so capable even against someone with such a powerful quirk. But Izuku tells Todoroki that it's honestly slightly disrespectful that he doesn't utilize all his powers. He doesn't utilize every last bit of his strength, and he wants him to utilize that fire side, utilize that other side. And well, Todoroki, he's saying that he won't use his father's quirk, he won't use his father's powers. But Izuku's telling him, that's not your father's powers. That's your powers. Control your destiny. Control your strength. Control what the powers have gifted you and the powers have given you. Really uphold that strength as your own. And eventually Todoroki would really understand what he's saying. And eventually Todoroki would finally give in, and he would utilize that fire side. But that doesn't mean that it would completely take over the fight. That doesn't mean he would actually be able to win, but it does give him a better chance. Izuku is having to deal with the fire and ice now combined of Todoroki, and it's difficult, very difficult to handle. But nonetheless, Izuku is able to keep up and able to actually fend off against Todoroki's fire and ice, and actually able to defeat Todoroki after a long, hard-fought battle. And this would lead Izuku on to his next fights against someone like Tenya Ida, who he easily is able to defeat, being that he already outclasses him in hand-to-hand combat and stuff like that. But the one fight that everybody is really excited to watch is the one between Bakugo and Izuku. But this one, it's already over before it started, because Izuku has the upper hand on Bakugo all the time, has defeated Bakugo every time. Yes, has this made Bakugo even stronger and made him want to work even harder? Of course. But that doesn't mean Izuku hasn't been working 10 times harder than Bakugo has always been working in the first place. And Izuku, well, he would embarrass Bakugo. Not on purpose, but he would embarrass him, defeating him very quickly, utilizing every kind of upper hand that he has, and really showing off the absolute horrible technique issues that Bakugo could potentially have and has in general. And he's able to fend off and or defeat Bakugo very, very quickly. And everybody watches intently, thinking, wow, this was insane. The fact that he was able to defeat Bakugo in the way he was and the way he did, that was amazing. Everybody cheers on Izuku. It's just living proof on why he was the #1 student, living proof why he was the most capable. But luckily Izuku, well, he's prepared for this new internship, because the choice is very easily known now that he gets the offer from Gran Torino and or the past sensei of All Might himself. He gains the powers of One for All, and Izuku has a choice to be made in terms of how he approaches learning from Gran Torino. But Gran Torino, well, he treats Izuku with respect, and honestly, he really trains Izuku very, very hard. And he's already so far ahead of so many different other versions of people who gained One for All, that Izuku and his capabilities are shown off to a large extent. Izuku shows off these capabilities and shows off everything that he's capable of, and he quickly takes a very, very, very quick understanding to what One for All is and how to utilize it. Over the course of 3 days, he's already utilizing it at a high level, almost to the point where he's controlling it at 20% of One for All, and which Gran Torino is massively impressed. But during one of his meditation sessions after their normal training session, he starts seeing things that he didn't expect to see, and that is the different users of One for All. They would actually be talking to Izuku, asking him questions, but Izuku unable to answer at this moment. And basically they would ask him yes or no questions, and that's how he would answer, nodding his head yes or shaking his head no. And they would ask him that, does he feel like he is prepared to take on this burden, take on the burden of being the user of One for All. And they would even tell him that they are very impressed by what he's capable of and what he has done so far, and that he seems to be the best of all of them combined. And it seems that the idea of him utilizing the kind of the way of the samurai will allow him to become one of the greatest One for All users that anybody has ever seen, in which they tell him that he will have way more to attend to. He will have so much more to worry about before he can possibly even know it, and to keep his head on straight, keep his worries in line, and make sure to always stay focused. Izuku would bow to them, as all of them would be pretty impressed by just the way he approaches things, and pretty impressed with Izuku himself. So much so, a lot of them honestly don't have anything to hide from Izuku. They all respect him and all think that he is honestly is the proper successor to One For All, and frankly might even be more disciplined than even All Might himself. He waves his goodbyes as his meditation would end, and he would now be back into the normal world, realizing that his now meditation is a gateway to see the past users of One For All, in which Izuku continues his training with Gran Torino, trying to master the art of One For All and the usage of One For All as a quirk, and now it's finally time for them to get some real world experience. And this real world experience would allow him to, for the most part, learn and also kind of figure out how these kind of, walk around slash lookouts for different villains, you could even say, or maybe even kind of just going on his first patrol. And he's going on this patrol with Gran Torino, at least at Hosu City, and the whole idea is to actually just get a feel for it, get an understanding what the patrol is like, and what looking around and understanding what the society and what the people are like. But the thing is, All For One during this time is actually on the lookout for the hero killer, so Nomus and other criminals begin to show their face at Hosu City, forcing Izuku and also Gran Torino to actually try and help evacuate a lot of the people there. And it goes somewhat well, because Izuku is eventually thrusted into a situation against the hero killer himself, so to basically defend Tenya Ida from imminent doom. And that's what he does. Izuku shows his capabilities with swordsmanship and his ability to utilize a sword in general against the hero killer, and let's just say everybody would be impressed if they saw how Izuku was handling the hero killer situation, because Izuku puts the absolute hands on the hero killer, or more like the absolute sword on the hero killer, and he begins to show the level of swordsmanship really he's at. Now, don't get it twisted, the hero killer is no joke. In terms of swordsmanship, he is no joke, but Izuku, he's just at a different level at this point, it seems. His speed, his strength, his abilities, I mean, especially with his ability to kind of go Zen mode, slow down the time around him, and really show that everything that tries to come to pass, that the hero killer tries to do, is easily countered by Izuku, leading to Izuku eventually being able to kind of fend off the hero killer, defeat him, and then with the help of an approaching endeavor, finish the hero killer to the point where he's knocked out and he's able to get captured and or kind of put in prison, luckily. But of course, he would get in trouble a little bit with what he did to protect, especially with who was there and stuff like that. He wasn't supposed to be fighting, and it does get Gran Torino in a little bit of trouble and get them in a little bit of trouble. But luckily, they, for the most part, go unscathed. And Izuku says that he understands that they have rules, that the heroes have rules, but he has a rule himself. That rule is to never allow someone to get hurt, especially if he can do something to stop it. And that's what he did. He found a way to stop it, and he stopped it. And he tells him that he'll be more conscious of what happens next time, but he won't ever just allow someone to get hurt for no reason, in which that's the truth. And Izuku, well, he continues on after all this is said and done, and the internships are cut a little bit short, but with the usage of One For All and finally the understanding of his own quirk being even more kind of enhanced, he is now ready for their final exams. Now, the written portion is a pretty simple and straightforward thing. I mean, we all know what a written portion of an exam is like, but of course, the practical exam is what everyone's waiting for, because Izuku will go head-to-head against All Might himself. Yes, legitimately, head-to-head with All Might himself. And this is a pretty damn amazing thing to watch. And it's Izuku versus All Might. There's nobody else there, nobody else to restrict, nobody else to work with. And Izuku goes head to head, and it's pretty interesting to watch. All Might has some strength left over, don't get me wrong, but Izuku shows that he can freaking do his thing. I mean, he is showing that with the combination of One For All, but then his skills and abilities as a swordsman, I mean, it's totally different, and it's a totally different level of power and strength that he is showing off. And all these teachers, all these faculty are watching Izuku go head to head with All Might, and they wonder, how long can they keep this kid, especially being a student, before they honestly should send him off to be a hero already? I mean, they need to put him in proper circumstances to where they could really have him help society now. I mean, he has the strength, he has the power, he has the understanding, he has everything. They need to put him and really kind of push him along quicker than normal. But Aizawa is a little bit against it, thinking that just because he's ready doesn't mean he shouldn't continue on with being a student, continue on with being a kid. Allow him to have that, because once he doesn't have that, he'll always have to push forward. He'll always have to protect. He'll always have to be perfect. And Izuku is allowed to have those mistakes now, but he won't. He won't be able to have those mistakes later. And the fight with All Might, it's amazing. It's awesome to watch, but of course it would come to an end with actually a bit of a draw, you could say. Izuku doesn't necessarily try to like kill All Might or anything, but he does kind of use capture tape, quote unquote, winning him the quote unquote fight. But it's not like their fight goes on to the very end, and it's not like their fight goes on until someone is like, you know, on the ground out cold or something like that. And of course, this would be a pretty damn awesome thing to watch, and everybody is insanely impressed by it. But this would lead them to the forest training camp, where the forest training camp would kick off with an absolute bang, especially when you have someone get their entirety of everybody of Class 1A get thrown off a cliff to take on monster after monster. But here's the thing. The forest training camp is perfect for Izuku. Izuku is going to be able to learn, be able to create, be able to absolutely ensue in just upping his level of skill, game, and or powers with One For All, with his samurai quirk and with his swordsman skills, and he continues to spiral out of control with how powerful he's getting. Izuku's strength continues to multiply, continues to just be absolutely insane, and everybody believes that this kid, I mean, he might not have a cap on his potential. His potential might genuinely be limitless, which is an absolute insane thing to even think about when Izuku is showing off an even higher level of swordsmanship, but also even higher level of just raw power, being able to utilize 40% of One For All with a power already enhancing his strength and a power already ensuing in showing how strong he is in terms of his swordsmanship. I mean, he's able to make a phantom's like or spectral like blade already, and then on top of that, utilizing 40% of One For All, I mean, allows him to ensue strength that everybody would look at as almost borderline godlike. And it would make people honestly happy to see that he's on their side, but also terrified to see that someone could truly get this strong. I mean, where is this world going? Where are they headed to if someone like him already exists? Soon there will be people even stronger, quirks even more powerful, maybe so much so that a lot of people won't even be able to handle the power of their own quirks. And this would lead on to about 2 weeks of training at the forest training camp, and before you know it, they're already heading back to UA. And as they're heading back to UA, well, Izuku and everybody else, well, they see the news, and the news is pretty apparent and shown all around the world that All Might is now in a locked fight with All For One, and this is to change the future for the rest of every single person's lives. And everybody watches intently as All Might would come out victorious, but the end of an era would ensue. Yes, All For One may be defeated and the League of Villains may be stopped, but with All Might's, well, you know, presence and his strength being gone like the last embers of a burning flame, we now know that the new era has now entered, and that they have now entered a new era of what hero society truly is, not only in Japan, but all around the freaking world. But what's next for Izuku and Class 1A? Well, what's next is for them to become partial/provisional heroes, and that will allow them to take their chances and take their level to that very next step. But with that said, we're gonna have to wait on that to the next and final part 2 of 2 of what if Deku had a samurai quirk? Izuku Midoriya and his class are finally going to go into their Provisional Hero License exam. And the Provisional Hero License exam, it's gonna be something to behold. Because Izuku is ready for whatever is to come. And in all honesty, he's prepared to take on anyone who's going to face him down. And to start off, you have something very simple. You have like a dodgeball-like sequence where everybody has to tag each other with these red balls to basically turn off each other's lights and, for the most part, actually eliminate each other. And Izuku, well, he has no issues in doing so. He is extremely fast, extremely strong, extremely capable, especially with the usage of One For All. His usage of One For All is already extremely high. It's at 40 freaking %. So, and with his powers, his strength, and all the above, are like, already, he honestly is more prepared than you could imagine. And he's able to get through this portion of the Provisional Hero License exam very, very quickly. But that's when we get on to this next portion that is going to be a lot more important than anything else they have currently done. And that is this rescue-like portion of the exam, or the practical-like portion of this exam. And it all has a lot to do with Izuku and many others working together to try to save a multitude of people. And Izuku begins to do that, helping those who are in need, those who are crying out for help, and being able to determine who needs help and who doesn't need as much assistance. On top of that, Izuku is helping, here and there, but the real help that he's going to be able to give is when he stands on the front lines to face against an incoming villain attack or fake villain attack of Gang Orca and a bunch of fake villains. They would stand there, awaiting and watching as Izuku would go head to head with Gang Orca. And in all honesty, Gang Orca doesn't even stand a chance. I mean, Gang Orca is restricted to an extent because he's not allowed to go all out against the students, but Izuku himself is putting it on Gang Orca. Everyone's watching in awe, looking at how fast he strikes through, how he seems to be just already knowing what Gang Orca is doing, and he even unveils some new attacks where he slices through the air, creating kind of like this wind-like strike that slices through every single villain there, knocking them all to their butts and to their backs, and just laying them to waste very quickly. Not killing them, of course, but knocking them out and handling the issue of those villains quicker than you could imagine. And everybody watches in awe at the aspect and also the prospect of what Izuku can potentially be, and frankly, what he is right now. And it's an amazing thing to behold, an amazing thing to watch. And Izuku Midoriya just shows off skills that many others would have no clue were even possible at this point, especially with his progression at being a potential candidate of being a full-time hero in the next coming years. But after it is all said and done, Izuku gets a very, very high score, like a very high score in the Provisional Hero License exam that would lead him to getting his obvious Provisional Hero License. And that Provisional Hero License, it couldn't feel any freaking better for Izuku Midoriya, because all he's thinking about is the fact that he finally did it. He freaking did it. He is now here. He is now ready, and he is now on track to doing exactly what he wants to do. And now he is on track to being the hero he wants to be. And it's an amazing thing to watch, and an amazing thing that Izuku Midoriya is basically capable of doing and continues to be able to do. It's pretty damn awesome, and Izuku shows every single person that there is levels to being a hero, and he might just be on a completely different stratosphere than everyone else. And that's the reality of it. And everybody, honestly, they don't feel bad about Izuku being so far ahead, but it just makes them feel like they should push even harder, try even harder. And that right there is a very important thing, because if everybody works harder, if Izuku Midoriya makes everyone push harder, then every single person is going to get better. Especially because Izuku has already made someone like Bakugo push and also get better in general, especially with how far behind he was in comparison to Izuku. Bakugo was behind Izuku, right? He was falling behind massively, and Bakugo was chasing after basically a ghost, chasing after Izuku in hopes of trying to catch up, of trying to be better, trying to be as good, if not better, than Izuku Midoriya. But of course, it's not that simple, especially with where he's at the moment. But he still tries his best to catch up and tries his best to get to the point where, he's somewhat in the same kind of vicinity as Izuku in terms of hero work and or hero association. That he wants to be up there with Izuku. He wants to be on the same level, if not better than Izuku. So having these other people who are basically chasing after him, trying their best to catch up to him, that is a big thing. And that is a big thing that many people will definitely try their best to, keep up with, and many people will basically get better because of the way Izuku approaches things. Now, with all that said, with the provisional hero license done and in the past, Izuku now continues with what he has to do. And one of those things that is going to be continued with and or kind of progressed with, and that is basically him working with other people and him working with basically a lot of other hero agencies. Now, the main hero agency that he would get actually accepted into and personally offer to is Sir Night-Eye's agency. And the reason for this is not because he's just the successor of All Might, but on top of that, he is basically shown to Mirio after a bit of a sparring session that he is at a level that is of pro hero caliber as well. So of course Mirio would basically tell Sir Night-Eye that it's a good idea to have someone like him around, and probably a good idea to see what he's capable of and see what he can actually do. And that is the reality of it. And Izuku, well, he gets his chance with Sir Night-Eye's agency, and he gets his chance with basically working alongside Mirio Togata, especially when their whole idea is to try their best to basically take down someone by the name of Overhaul. And Overhaul is a big component of the villain society. Not as big as someone like All for One, but a big part of basically these gang war societies, and he's a big part of the Shiya Hazaikai. And the Shiya Hazaikai has been a very big issue for a very long time, but with the help of Izuku, maybe they will be able to take them down once and for all. And what they wouldn't even understand and what they wouldn't even know is that one day when they're on patrol, when both Izuku Midoriya and Mirio Togata are actually on a patrol, they run into somebody that they had no idea or were not expecting to run into ever. And well, this is what comes, and this is what happens when you run into, well, Overhaul, someone that is very dangerous, someone that could truly make a difference in terms of hurting somebody that's around. But also, you gotta be careful when dealing with someone like Overhaul, especially with someone that could truly kind of hurt those around you without even thinking. But what happens when you have to mix the danger of Overhaul with the actual idea of someone being in massive danger, like Eri, a little girl who had nothing to do with anything, a little girl who truly is in a bad spot right now, that is being used for her own blood because of the quirk that she was gifted. She is in a bad and terrible spot that she can't get out of, that someone needs to help her get out of. And that's what Izuku wants to do. Izuku wants to help her get out of her situation, but how can he do it? Does he allow Overhaul to leave? Does he allow him to leave and then, eventually siege the Shiya Hazaikai base and then save her then and there? Or does he try to stop him now? I mean, the risks of trying to stop him now are pretty damn big, but there is always risks. There's always something. There's always a bad omen. And Izuku, well, when Eri runs over to give him a hug and ask for his help, he would hug her, in which he would ask if she's okay, everything's going to be all right. In which he looks at Overhaul, and Murio's basically a borderline kicking him, telling him to stop what he's doing. But Izuku, well, he has an unbreakable will, an understanding that if someone needs help, they will, or he will give them help. He refuses to allow them to leave, putting Eri behind him as he immediately has his sword appear in his hand, and he tells Overhaul that he is making a big mistake doing what he's doing, making a big mistake thinking he could just leave. Overhaul would laugh in his face, telling him that asking if he has a death wish, and Overhaul goes and touches the ground with his bare hand, but then nothing happens. Izuku Midoriya continues to give off this aura. It's as if it's his samurai's will, this unbreakable resolve. And as this is happening, as Izuku is giving off this aura of just unbreakable will, it seems like the quirk that is actually within Overhaul is backfiring, is not working. It's as if it's intimidated in a way and is being completely held off by something, in which Izuku would end up realizing that it has something to do with the actual past users of One For All, combined with the will that he already had within his own quirk that he had no idea even existed. Basically putting the former users of One For All in a place where they're connected to Overhaul, holding the quirk from actually being utilized, canceling the quirk in a way, and allowing Izuku to approach Overhaul and knock him out quicker than you could imagine, cutting through him and also knocking him out, not killing him, but knocking him out and putting him under cuffs and or quirk canceling cuffs, and then forcing him back to prison for the rest of his life. But yes, there are good and bad things of this, in which Sir Night-Eye does bring up the fact that they don't have information now on where the Shia Hazzaikai base is. I mean, it could be really anywhere, but they end up taking a little bit more time than normal to actually find out where the base is, trying to backtrack where Overhaul came from, but they eventually do find it. So the idea of Izuku saving Eri and defeating Overhaul sooner rather than later, well, it's not the worst idea in the world. Plus, Izuku tells him and tells all of them that he was never going to sit there and allow a little girl to be scared, to be hurt, and just to be basically in a horrible, horrible, horrible spot. He was never going to allow that to happen. He was never going to allow them to just hurt Eri, and he was never going to just, allow that to happen the way it happened. And he was never going to just be like, you know what, yeah, I'm gonna let you leave, blah, blah, blah. Like, no. He was never going to let that happen. And yes, I get it. There's a lot to be done, and there's a lot of things that could have went wrong. A lot of things that could have went wrong. But Izuku, he knows that he would have never let somebody just get away that was a terrible person, that was such a bad person that basically would have just killed Eri if they didn't know any better. Yes, they didn't know for sure if it would happen, but he was never going to take that risk, and it looks like it ended up working in their favor, because they got Overhaul, but that's not it. They were able to get Overhaul, they were able to put him behind bars, and then they were able to find the Shia Hazzaikai base, and Izuku helps them cut through the entirety of the base as they defeat villain after villain, and immediately every single one of them would be behind bars, in prison, and cuffs around their wrists, and the Shia Hazzaikai would then be defeated. Now, there are other issues at hand. There always will be other issues at hand. And Izuku, well, he isn't and might not be the biggest component of every last one of them. But there is one issue that every single person there realizes is a bigger issue than they could imagine. And that is a rumbling and terrifying Gigantomachia running through Japan just months later, trying to actually get All For One, Shigaraki, and many of the League of Villains out of prison. And as Gigantomachia runs through, as heroes try to stop him, as everybody tries to slow him down, it's borderline impossible. and Izuku stands there and tries his best himself to cut through Gigantomachia, and even uses all of the power he possibly can, creating this spirit-infused sword, a giant sword that would come striking down on Gigantomachia. It would slow him down and stop him momentarily, and their plan to basically put Gigantomachia to sleep, utilizing Midnight's kind of pheromones, it's not working to the degree they thought. They keep trying over and over, and Izuku eventually would jump up on Gigantomachia, and he would splice his sword, a giant sword, through Gigantomachia to ground him, put him right in the ground. And as he holds the sword, these black like tendrils would out of nowhere come out of his body. This is the awakening of just one of his many quirks, something that he didn't even know would happen, but it's Black Whip surrounding the monster and holding the monster still as it connects with Izuku, and the Black Whip also connects with the sword as it's continuously holding this giant monstrous creature to the ground, and everybody watches on as Izuku screams in agony trying to hold this creature still before he gets to the actual, prison. Izuku holds the creature as eventually you have, Midnight put the creature to sleep, and eventually the creature would fall short, unable to move, and unable to actually have its last-ditch efforts to save its master, being that of All for One. Everybody struggles and gasps for air, and they're just happy that they were able to stop/defeat the monster that could have ensued in some very, very, very dangerous spots. Something that could have been extremely, extremely bad was able to be stopped, at least momentarily, and luckily enough, no one was hurt in the long run, and luckily enough, no one was going to be hurt in the long run as well. Now, with all that said and done though, Izuku Midoriya has so much more to do than just do what he's been doing. Izuku Midoriya knows that there's a lot in his future. So much more than he could possibly even imagine. So much more than you could possibly even fathom. Izuku Midoriya knows that to be a hero, he has to truly live up to the expectations of even someone like All Might himself. But even Izuku Midoriya didn't know that at a young age, when he becomes the hero, when he starts becoming that number one, that he would fall on his sword very, very quickly. Because the years he had, all the years in the future he could have had to basically be that hero, to be the hero that many others thought he would be, it seems like they were coming to an end at a young age of only 22. It seems that the usage of One For All combined with his actual quirk has hurt him, has made him a lot weaker, and has actually made him in a spot where he no longer can continue pushing forward, that he can no longer be the hero he wanted to be. And this makes him sad. This makes him extremely angry and frustrated. How? How did it get to this point? How is he able, and how is he able to utilize the quirk so efficiently, but that now he's unable to even utilize it at all? It makes no sense. It doesn't. And he honestly is ripped to shreds by this idea that he's no longer going to be a hero, and that he's going to basically let every single person down that he wanted, that he genuinely wanted to make proud. And, well, let's just say Izuku Midoriya, well, he would fall short of what he wanted to do, and he would be given the option by even a slightly older Eri herself to rewind him to the point where he's, able to fight once again. But Izuku tells her that it will just continue to be the same thing over and over again years later. It's only going to give him a couple years. But then Eri asks him and tells him, well, what about if we rewind you to before you took on One For All, before you took the quirk of All Might? In which Izuku, well, he has a long conversation with All Might himself, and even the vestiges tell him that that is the only way for him to continue being a hero and continue being the damn good hero he knows he can be. In which Izuku says, what about One For All? It stops here, that he will be the last. In which they tell him that he would have been the last anyways. you might as well give him the opportunity and the chance to be the hero that he was going to be anyways in the very first place. Don't, sacrifice your hero career because a lot of us, and the other one for all users, weren't ready to truly help society the way we could have. In which Izuku realizes that this is the only way, and they rewind him to the point where he no longer has one for all, and he's back to, honestly, a pretty young age. And this does confuse Izuku a little bit, but as he grows up and as he continues on, Izuku continues his hero work, less powerful, but still with power that he can be grateful and honorable for. He's honored to have the power he has, and he's honored to put a good name and also a good idea to the world of what a samurai truly is. And Izuku Midoriya continues to save, help, and basically handle issues after issues. And even if he couldn't achieve that number 1 status anymore, and even if he would be short of that number 1 status, well, it doesn't matter to him. Because what matters to him is that he's able to help, save, and do everything in his possible basically idea to help those who truly need it. And even if he doesn't reach number 1 status, at least he can stand right beside someone who does, the one and only Mirio Togata. But with all that said, if you enjoyed, show some love. Leave a like, leave a sub, leave a comment down below. This is for now the end of What If Deku Had a Samurai Quirk.